Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to the Gita Jayanthi special, where we are studying a high-level summary of the 18 chapters in 18 days of the Bhagavad Gita, covering around 700 shlokas. So far, we've completed 5 chapters. We've also looked at the single word summary for each of the chapters, so that there is a very nice and simple way in which we can remember the trajectory of the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, the message of the Lord cannot be summarized in single words. But as we get ready to study the middle 6 chapters, which is Bhakti Yoga, then the message of the Lord becomes very loud and clear as to what He really wants. So we'll do a quick overview of the first 5 chapters at a very high level. And then we can begin our chapter 6 today. So the entire Bhagavad Gita begins with the two sides being on the battlefield. All of them seem to be ready to fight. But then something unusual happens. Normally, when you're on the battlefield, you already know who is on the opposing side. For some reason, Arjuna asks, my dear Krishna, please take me to the middle of the battlefield. I want to know who all have come here to fight, just so they can please the most despicable person, Duryodhana. And from there, the trajectory changes for a little while, with Arjuna's mood and sentiments and everything changing. He's not sure suddenly whether he should really pick up the bow and fight his own family over something as mundane as it would seem as just a piece of land. Because a piece of land doesn't seem to be so important as someone's life. And we said how the entire Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 sections. The first section is all about us. Who is the Jivatma? What are the challenges that we face? What's the duties and responsibilities we have? What are the qualifications that we need to perform those duties and responsibilities very nicely? How can we control our mind? Because mind tends to be our biggest enemy, which we will discover today in chapter 6. Most of us have problems with ourselves. Therefore, what's the key to managing the mind is something that we will discover today. So the first 6 chapters is about ourselves. How do we manage ourselves? Then we said the next 6 chapters, which is chapters 7 to 12, is all about the Supreme Lord. And the Lord unabashedly speaks about himself for 6 chapters. Of course, the Lord also speaks about his devotees in the middle 6 chapters. So the middle 6 chapters, if the first 6 chapters are all about you or Jivatma, the middle 6 chapters is all about the Supreme Lord Krishna or Paramatma. And then the last 6 chapters is about material nature or Prakriti. It is this Prakriti that we are trapped in. It is this Prakriti that is causing us to experience birth, old age, disease, and finally death. So we need to understand where we are living, why are we suffering, what is the primary causes for our suffering, and how do you overcome those challenges is addressed in the final 6 chapters. So Jivatma, Paramatma, and Prakriti. These are the 3 sections of the Bhagavad Gita. And you could also look at the 3 sections of the Bhagavad Gita in terms of yoga. So the first 6 chapters are Karma Yoga, the middle 6 chapters are Bhakti Yoga, and the final 6 chapters are Jnana Yoga. So the final 6 chapters tend to be a little bit more dry, a lot more philosophy, a lot more information regarding this philosophy. So, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. So, why do we need to know about ourselves in the first 6 chapters? It's because you and I are also suffering from amnesia, and you and I are also lamenting, although you and I are lamenting for very different reasons than what Arjuna was lamenting for on the battlefield. Just like Arjuna has suddenly lost his mind, we have also lost our minds. We can't seem to separate which is up, which is down, which is right, which is wrong. What's my most important duty? These things we really don't know until we get into the scriptures. Then slowly, step by step, over a period of time, through the process of sadhana, under the guidance of Vaishnavas and sadhus and guru and shastra, we slowly begin to make progress and we begin to let go of this amnesia. So if you don't know who you are, and if you don't know what your job responsibilities are, if you don't know what your original qualifications are, and if you don't know what is the result you are actually working towards, then you are unwell and you need help. And when I say you, I'm including me there as well. So we all need help because we're all suffering from amnesia. It's just the degree of forgetfulness is different for each one of us. So it's a slow step-by-step process to understand who we are, and that's what Krishna is trying to do for Arjuna in the first 6 chapters. So just like Arjuna is lamenting in the first chapter, you and I are also lamenting. We have always got something to complain about in our life. Health is not doing well. Health of family member is not that good. Finances are a problem. Relationship is a problem. Self-confidence is a problem. So you and I also engage in lamentation. And the reason you and I lament is that we have forgotten we are spirit soul. Everything that we lament about is actually based on the temporary body. So we're lamenting for things that are going to be over after a few years. You and I are going to be gone. The soul can reside in this body only for so long. So Arjuna Vishada Yoga was the first chapter. Arjuna is extremely dejected, desperate, depressed. So in the second chapter, what is the first thing that Guru has to do for you? He has to start treating your amnesia. And slowly he has to tell you, do you remember who you really are? Have you not observed all around you there is death and destruction? Do you not know that you're going to also give up this body one day? Do you not know that you are an eternal spirit soul? Do you not know that that is your real identity? That's actually the only ID card that makes any difference for us in our spiritual well-being, as well as our material well-being. So this basic yoga of knowledge, the Sankhya Yoga, which Krishna speaks about in the second chapter, talks about the higher principles of life. And Krishna doesn't speak these higher principles of life until Arjuna asks him to. Until Arjuna asks for help and intervention. Arjuna is clear, he wants help. Arjuna is also clear that he wants help and guidance from Krishna. Therefore he says, I am a soul surrendered unto you, please instruct me. So the second chapter is all about the spirit soul. Of course, it is also a good summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita. It does speak about Sankhya Yoga, it speaks about Dhyana Yoga, it speaks about Bhakti Yoga, it speaks about Jnana Yoga. That's why the second chapter is quite lengthy. And Krishna also gives examples, or rather takes examples of souls in the past who have achieved complete bliss by becoming his devotees in chapter 2. So in chapter 3, which is titled Karma Yoga, we have to know what our original job duty is. We've clocked out of the spiritual world for whatever reason, and we've come here. What were you and I doing in the spiritual world in our original positions? Because we understood that we were spirit soul. But then the Lord keeps his instructions to Arjuna very much anchored to what Arjuna is experiencing now. So the Lord really doesn't speak about the spiritual world in chapter 3, which he will wait till Arjuna asks a few more questions and then he'll speak about it in the middle 6 chapters. So right now he is only keen on establishing to Arjuna that he is a spirit soul. Yes, he is occupying a body, but because he is occupying a human body, what is the definition of dharma? Where does this dharma begin? This dharma begins when Krishna says, everyone has to perform yajna for the pleasure of Vishnu. That's where dharma begins. And Krishna says everyone has to perform the sacrifice. Every human being, no exception. No exception to age, no exception to gender, no exception to educational qualifications, no exception to your intelligence levels. No exception to varna, no exception to ashrama. So Krishna's specific instruction for all of us is that work must be performed as a sacrifice to please Lord Vishnu. What are the different ways in which we can work to perform this sacrifice for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu? Krishna talks about different types of sacrifices in the next chapter, which is titled Transcendental Knowledge. So in order to perform your work for the pleasure of Vishnu, what is the knowledge you need to know? Because remember, Krishna has said we have to work to please Vishnu. Your next obvious question would be, why should I work to please Vishnu? And why Vishnu and why not anybody else? Why not Lord Shiva? Why not Parvati Devi? Why not any of the other gods that we are all familiar with? Demigods that we are familiar with. Why specifically Vishnu? Krishna says that's everybody's duty. You could be a great devotee of Lord Shiva, but still Krishna is saying you have to worship for the pleasure and do your yajna to please Vishnu. So this why Vishnu is answered in question in chapter 4, which is titled Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. You take your actions, add the transcendental knowledge to it, and you have achieved Sannyasa Yoga. So the yoga of knowledge. And what is this transcendental knowledge? Why has Krishna asked us to work for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu? Because he says, I'm the one who comes down to re-establish dharma. I actually maintain all of you, all the jivatmas. So should we not worship that personality that's maintaining you and me? So to understand who this personality is and what is his nature and what does he do, why does he come, Krishna gives some brief examples. But the actual nature of the Paramatma comes in the middle 6 chapters. So, because we've taken so many births, we have forgotten, due to our consciousness being contaminated, what our real nature is. We've forgotten who is God. We've forgotten what relationship we have with God. And that is being re-established by Krishna in chapter 4. And Krishna says, to make it easier for you to think about me and perform sacrifices for me, I have created the Varnashrama system so that all of you can cooperate very nicely with each other in order to please Lord Vishnu as the first duty. So you could say that the first 4 chapters are the basic ABCDs of spiritual life. So now, for the first time in chapter 4, Krishna has established himself as the Supreme Lord. He's talked about the 3 Ds, why he comes, for the pleasure of his devotees, to annihilate the demons, and to re-establish dharma. And in the same chapter, Krishna says, you can actually learn a little bit more about me, about you, our relationship from a guru. Krishna says this knowledge has come down in the parampara system and this knowledge has originated in me. So he talks about the 3 S's. Surrender to Guru, submissively ask questions, and offer services to the Guru. These 3 things. Which sets the stage for chapter 5. Karma Sannyasa Yoga. Which is, if you add Krishna to the picture, because he has told you to do that in chapter 3, he's told you who he is in chapter 4. And now Krishna is saying, well, now that you know that I am the Supreme Lord, if you have faith and if you are convinced by this, then what will you do if you follow all my instructions, what I have given up till now? What will be the result of working for me? And we understood that that result will be peace. So the benefits of applying what was the instructions of Krishna in chapters 2, 3, and 4 is described by Krishna in chapter 5. We said in chapter 3, Krishna said, whatever work you do it as a sacrifice for me. And we talked about the 2 problems that we all have. One is our baser desires and 2 is our doubts. It's this desire that is addressed in chapter 3. How to regulate one's desires is addressed in chapter 3, where Krishna talks about lust, anger, and greed. with specific emphasis on lust being our greatest enemy. How to tackle that greatest enemy, lust, is addressed in chapter 3. In chapter 4, we who lack faith always are carrying doubts in our hearts. Is there a God? Is this all a make believe? Did somebody make up all of this just to make us feel better and force us to look at who we are and help us become better human beings? Is there really a God? Is there really a material world? Is there really a spiritual world? Is there really something called Papa and Punya? Is there really something called Karma? Or is this all something somebody has concocted just to control you? So we carry so many doubts within us. And to destroy those doubts, Krishna talks about himself and us and our relationship with him in chapter 4. So the results of working for Krishna is presented to Arjuna in chapter 5. So another way to look at this is that chapters 2, 3, and 4 are like the medicine you need to take in order to achieve that outcome of peace. If we take it as per Krishna's instructions, then we should achieve that end result of peace. So the before effects of knowing this is lamentation by Arjuna. The after effects of hearing all of this is peace of mind. Because Krishna himself is guiding Arjuna as Arjuna is battling with his inner demons. So let's look at a quick summary of chapter 5 and then what's the connection between chapter 5 and chapter 6. So in chapter 5 begins with Arjuna being a little bit confused. And the reason he's confused is that in the previous chapter, in the penultimate shloka, the last shloka is 42, the previous shloka, which is shloka number 41 of chapter 4, Krishna has in one shloka glorified jnana and also glorified renunciation. In that same shloka, Krishna is then telling Arjuna, Uttishta Bharata, stand up and fight. That creates a little confusion for Arjuna. He's saying, you just told me jnana, then you are also telling me renounce. Then in that same context, why are you asking me to fight? The same question was asked in a different way in chapter 3, right? You're asking me to use my buddhi and to stay away from abominable things in chapter 2. And at the end of chapter 2, you're telling me to fight. So that same confusion, but with a slightly different emphasis, is being experienced by Arjuna here. And therefore he says, you have to tell me once and for all which is better. Should I work with devotion to please you? Or should I renounce work? Because you seem to say both are good. Both are good paths to choose. So now Arjuna is thinking, okay, if both are good paths to choose, and I have chosen the path of renunciation, why are you asking me to fight? So Krishna says, yes, actually, there's nothing wrong with renunciation. Renunciation of everything leads to liberation. But working with devotion for my pleasure also leads to liberation. Of the two, Krishna says, working for me with devotion is better. How is it better? It takes you to Krishna on a fast track. That's like the bullet train compared to your other regular passenger trains. So Jnana Yoga is one passenger train. Karma Yoga is one more passenger train. Then Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga is one more passenger train. And Krishna is saying this Bhakti Yoga is like a bullet train. It's going to get you to me faster. Isn't that our entire objective of human life, is to go back to Krishna? So Arjuna's confusion was, should I stop or should I start? Should I stop and go away to the forest or should I start fighting? That was Arjuna's question. So Krishna is definitively saying, working with devotion, which means fighting with devotion for the pleasure of Krishna, is superior than giving up everything and becoming a sannyasi. So in Shloka 7 to 12, Krishna comes back to the topic of Nishkama Karma Yoga, which is just work is worship. You're doing it out of a sense of duty. You don't care for the results, or you sacrifice the results. You're not interested in keeping the results for yourself. So Krishna says in these shlokas, such a person is already self-realized. He's not performing any karmic work. So Krishna says in shlokas 8 and 9, a person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. So such a person knows that the body is different than the soul. The soul is more important. Avoiding karmic reactions is very important. So it's in that mood that they work. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So Krishna is saying all of us can work. Whatever results we get, we can give it all to Krishna. Such a person is unaffected by sinful action. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. So why do the yogis do their duty? To purify themselves. Even though they are already self-realized souls, there's no more purification necessary, but they do it anyway. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. So here is the peace formula. Krishna is saying, be detached from the results. Offer your results to me. Then you will have pure peace of mind. And then Krishna says such a person can live happily in the city of 9 gates. The city of 9 gates is we have 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, 2 ears, and then 2 evacuatory systems. So the city of 9 gates is the city with these 9 holes in it. But he lives happily in the city of 9 gates. That means Krishna is saying, you can end all your anxiety and your problems here in this life. You don't have to wait for moksha. You can experience this peacefulness when you act in this way, right? Then Krishna then in the next section talks about the three doers. In the sense, the Atma desires, the Super Soul sanctions, and Prakriti carries out the Super Soul's instructions. So this is a three-way triangle, and the culprit is always the Atma, because it's the Atma that has the desires. So even though we have a desire, and we let us say, I wanted to run a 100-meter race and I wanted to come first. Yes, I had the talent. Yes, I worked very hard. I practiced every day and I came first. But there is other personalities involved in your coming first. That fact that everything had to go smoothly without any jeopardization of your good health, or you arriving at that arena on time that day, all of that enablement has been done by Krishna. So Krishna, that is why he says in the second chapter, don't think you are the cause of the results of your actions, because there are other beings involved. Sometimes we think, I worked hard. Why shouldn't I enjoy the results for myself? Yeah, you worked hard, but a greater power has helped you along the way. Krishna also says, the Supreme Lord does not assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Which means, if a Jivatma has a desire to kill someone, even that has to be sanctioned by Krishna. That doesn't mean Krishna becomes entangled in the sinful activities. In the same way, if a Jivatma has pious desires and enacts those pious desires, Krishna has nothing to do with it. He simply checks your file, sees if you have credit on both sides of the water tank that we talked about for karma. That's it. He sanctions it based on that. So Krishna is talking about how this knowledge actually helps you break free from this cycle of entrapment. So Krishna comes back to what you and I should do. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. So Krishna is again giving us qualities and symptoms of a self-realized soul. What does a self-realized soul do? They take refuge in Krishna. As they do that, their mind, their intelligence, their faith, their senses, all of it is becoming cleansed of all of the nonsense notions that we carry. And that puts them on the path of liberation. And then we read this shloka, Brahmane Gavihastini. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. So when a self-realized soul sees all these people, he only sees the Atma and the Paramatma within each of them. He does not see, is this a woman? Is this an Indian? Is this a devotee? Is this a Chandala? These things don't come into a self-realized person's mind when he sees another Jivatma. He only sees a temple in which the Paramatma is residing. So this is the result. So Krishna is saying, then what does that mean? These people are still very much alive here. They're practicing these different types of yoga. Krishna says, no problem. They've already conquered the conditions of birth and death. How have they conquered the conditions of birth and death? Because they don't have any material desires anymore. Hence, Krishna is saying they are flawless, like Brahman. They have acquired the qualities of Paramatma, Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. So, such a person leads a very peaceful life. And Krishna is saying such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self realized person enjoys unlimited happiness. Why? For he concentrates on the Supreme. So, Krishna has introduced himself in chapter 4. In chapter 5, he's saying, do you know why certain people are always so happy? Because they know who I am. And they know who they are, and they know what their duties and responsibilities are. And then Krishna is saying, what about all those material desires? Such self realized souls know that such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So Krishna is saying a wise man does not get himself entangled in all kinds of material desires because he knows that's going to be a trap for him. Then Krishna is saying, what do these wise men do? They know they are also going to die one day. So before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. So again, Krishna is saying, you don't have to wait till death to be in a blissful state. You just have to learn to control your senses, check your forces of desire and anger. You're already happy. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. So we said that this journey that we are undertaking is actually a journey within. Once you know who you are, actually, there is a very nice way in which you can remember it. So remember, Krishna is talking about the qualities of these great people, these self realized souls. What have they done? They've practiced self discipline, which we call sadhana. Through the process of self discipline, they have achieved some level of self control. When you achieve self control, you begin to observe yourself, and therefore your self awareness grows and increases. And the more your self awareness grows, you begin on the journey of awareness of who is Paramatma. And you finally reach your destination of self realization. So it's all about self discipline, self control, self awareness, self realization. That is why the first 6 chapters are called Jivatma. It's about you, it's about yourself, it's about your spirit soul. If you understood the nature of the spirit soul, that the spirit soul is always joyous, always searching for God, always happy when it is connected to God, then you know what the formula is. So those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So again, Krishna is giving a precondition for this. We have to be free from anger. We have to be free from material desires. We have to be on the path of self-realization. To do that, we have to be self-disciplined. And some important shloka. Krishna says such people are constantly endeavoring for perfection. Perfection in their sadhana. They are always setting goals and targets for themselves when it comes to spirituality. They are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. So Krishna himself is saying such a person who is practicing this transcendentalism, all of these hold good with him. So Krishna is very clear, whatever we do, we have to aim for perfection, especially in spiritual life. Material life also, nothing wrong with that. And then this is the connection to the next chapter. In shlokas 27 and 28, now Krishna is talking about how this person has gotten there. How have they become perfect like this? How have they become so self-disciplined? How come they are free from anger and desires? And Krishna is going to give an example of dhyana yoga here. And that sets the stage for the next chapter. So in shlokas 27 and 28, Krishna is saying, shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So here Krishna is talking about Ashtanga Yoga. And the chapter concludes with Krishna saying, a person who knows me and my position, who knows that ultimately whatever sacrifices and yajnas he does, I am the one who is accepting them. Such a person has to know that I am the Lord of all planets and I am the boss of all the demigods. Such a person knows that I am the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. Then such a person can attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. So, chapter 5, the acronym was STEP. So, should I work or renounce? Krishna says work is worship. Don't think you are the only doer, because the super soul and Prakriti are also engaged. The self-realized soul, how do they see others? How do they see themselves? What are the qualities that they acquire so that they come to that position where they are seeing everyone with equal vision? And the ultimate peace formula is to understand who Krishna is, what is his role in our life, and how he wants the best for us. He's giving us everything without expecting anything in return. That brings us to chapter 6, which is titled Dhyana Yoga. Let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today, acronym is easy, which is interesting because actually Dhyana Yoga is not easy at all. For the first question we're going to tackle in chapter 6 is your enemy, is your mind your enemy or your friend? Well, it can be both. And for 27 shlokas, Krishna talks about Ashtanga Yoga. Then Arjuna asks an interesting question. Wow, such people who perform yoga for many, 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 many years, what happens if they don't reach samadhi? So if you're practicing hatha yoga and if you don't reach the final stage of samadhi in this life, Arjuna wants to know what happened. Is that all a waste of effort? You have to start all over again in your next birth if you've not achieved samadhi in this birth. So, what is success and what is failure when you're pursuing a spiritual path? Krishna will talk about that in shlokas 37 to 45. And then finally, Krishna will compare the different kind of yogis and tell us his opinion on which yogi he thinks is the best. You don't have to go by what we say. Let's go by what Krishna is saying as to who is the best yogi. Karma yogi, a nishkama karma yogi, a jnana yogi, a dhyana yogi, or a bhakta. We'll find out what Krishna's assessment is. So, in this particular chapter, let us see how it begins. So, Krishna is saying, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. So, Krishna is emphasizing you don't have to change your dress code and become a sannyasi. You can be a grahastha Arjuna. You can be a kshatriya Arjuna. If you just work without being attached to the results, I consider you to be a sannyasi. In the sense, you are as good as a sannyasi. And he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. A sannyasi has no other duties left other than to preach. Because he's given up his family, he's given up his bank account, he's given up everything. His parents, he's taken on a new identity and fully sacrificed himself for the pleasure of the Lord. A sannyasi is not allowed to light a fire, which means he cannot cook for himself. Somebody else has to cook, and he is completely dependent on others bringing him his sustenance. So Krishna is saying the sannyasi does not light a fire. He actually does not have any duties because he's at that last stage, he's exited the varna. But a grihastha who's performing his duties and responsibilities without being attached to the results is as good as a sannyasi. So Krishna then says, what is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu. For no one can ever become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. What is the motive for Arjuna to leave the battlefield? Not because he doesn't have any sense gratification or sensory desires anymore. He wants to avoid pain. Krishna is saying you can't become a yogi unless you've given up all things, good and bad. Arjuna was interested in self-preservation and also preservation of his family. Both of them are based on the bodily platform, which means both of them are sense gratificatory in nature. So Krishna is saying, how you think you've become a yogi? O son of Pandu, one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. So for one who is a neophyte in the eightfold system, Work is said to be the means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. That means Krishna is saying, you cannot take on the sannyasi role or give up your varna and ashrama unless you've reached an advanced stage of yoga. Until then, because you will be new in this process, you have to continue working. So we'll see. Now Krishna is going to talk about yoga rurukshuhu and yoga ruda. A neophyte who's practicing Ashtanga yoga and an advanced person who's practicing Ashtanga yoga. What is his instructions for us, and how should this person be practicing yoga? So let's come back to the slides. So, bandhuratmanas manastasya yenatmevatmanejitah anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. Krishna is telling Arjuna, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. For the one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So Krishna is saying, your mind can be your friend or your enemy depending on how you deal with it. If you are the master of your mind, then you are in control. If your mind has become your master, then you've become the slave of your mind. Now, these are all very easy words to speak, but it is very difficult to control one's mind. But it can be done, because Arjuna himself will protest and say, wait a minute, you're asking me to do Ashtanga yoga just to control the mind? Good Lord, the process seems to be impractical and difficult, Krishna. So Arjuna will complain and saying, what you're asking me to do is impractical. What happens when your mind is your friend? Which is when you are the master of your mind, then your mind follows your direction. It works in ways that allows you to have a progressive, healthy, successful life. Make the right choices. When your mind follows your instructions, you can be detached from sense gratification. And what is the result? Krishna says freedom and elevation. Imagine, because you're not able to control your mind, we all end up in anxiety. So ultimately, if we learn how to manage our mind, we can manage ourselves super well. And then everything in life becomes very magical. Your relationships are all fine. Your mood is fine. Your nature becomes very different. So I was hearing from another preacher about stress. The definition of stress was given as follows. Stress is pressure divided by resilience. Pressure is external because the pressure comes from outside, right? Family members, finances, health, competition. Resilience is internal. So stress is pressure divided by resilience. In this equation, we cannot change the numerator. We can only influence and change the denominator. We cannot change external situations arising that is going to impose anxiety and stress. We can change our inner resilience. If we build our inner resilience, then we are able to handle any external pressure. And therefore, you can lead a stress-free life. So the more we work on ourselves internally, the less stress we have in our life. Even if the most stressful situation comes your way, others will be amazed at how easily you're able to manage it because you've built that inner resilience. So Krishna is actually talking about how dhyana yoga can actually help you build that inner resilience. And that inner resilience begins with your mind. And we'll see what are the 8 steps of this Ashtanga Yoga. When your mind becomes your enemy, it says, there is a saying in the Niti Shastra that compares the mind to a monkey. It is said that in a single day, your mind can think up to 80,000 thoughts. That's the speed with which your mind is acting. Can you imagine trying to control a mind like that? That is just working with such speed. So our Shastras compare the mind to a monkey because the monkey never sits still. It is always jumping from branch to branch, from tree to tree. The mind is like that. It's always jumping from one notion to another, from one emotion to another, from one thought to another. Therefore, it becomes your enemy. And when you don't have a steady mind, all of your senses are being dragged in different directions. And when all of your senses are being dragged in different directions, naturally you're going to become irritated, agitated, and misguided about what is right in life. Pretty soon it becomes normal for you to live your life like this. You become very, very entangled in whatever it is that you're doing. You know. So, first of all, the monkey is not steady. Then the Niti Shastra says, imagine if you've given that monkey alcohol. Then imagine if this monkey is on alcohol and is bitten by a scorpio. What would be the condition of that monkey? That's the condition of our mind today because we have not really learned how to manage our mind. So in this analogy, the chariot signifies, the 5 horses signifies the 5 senses. What you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you eat, what you touch. The mind is like that charioteer. If the mind has not learned how to control the senses, then finished. But what should guide the mind? The mind is a place of emotions. No? The mind is a place that just simply reacts to situations. The intelligence is a place for rationality, discrimination. Therefore, the intelligence has to do with your intellect. The mind generally is connected to your heart, how it's feeling. So essentially, if how you feel determines how you act, then you are lost because you've lost sense of discrimination. You're not allowing your intelligence to dictate the mind. And who is that I behind all of this? It's the false ego. So that's why Krishna says the sitting place of lust is the senses, mind, and intelligence in chapter 3. One way to control all of this is by doing dhyana yoga. But when we come to the middle 6 chapters, Krishna will say, actually, Bhakti Yoga will do it faster for you. Because Ashtanga Yoga is actually very difficult to do. So, what is this Ashtanga Yoga? Is it just a physical exercise? Is it just, trying to become very, very flexible with your body? What is Ashtanga Yoga and how should it be practiced? Interesting. Today there is yoga for everything. Yoga for moms, yoga for diabetes, business yoga, yoga. But this is not yoga. It's just one aspect of yoga. So let's look at how Krishna talks about yoga and how our scriptures talk about yoga. So yoga has 8 limbs. Yam, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So the goal of performing yoga is to reach Samadhi. Yoga means union. Union with whom? Paramatma. So if your objective is to reach Paramatma realization, then you have to follow this process. Yam means all the things that you should do. Niyam means all the things we should avoid. Asana is about your postures. Practicing correct way of sitting, correct way of breathing is the next pranayam. Probably at most we reach the pranayam stage if we are practicing yoga. Pratyahara, how to withdraw the senses from all the things outside us that is constantly impacting us. How to develop this dharana, concentration. How to reach the stage of dhyana where you are constantly meditating on Paramatma and nobody else. Until you reach the final stage, which is uniting and being in samadhi. So we said Krishna talked about a neophyte and advanced yogi. A neophyte is the first 5 stages: yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, and pratyahara. An advanced yogi is already well versed in dharana and dhyana and striving for samadhi. So this yoga rurukshuhu is the first 5, and the yoga rudha is dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So Krishna talks about the do's, the rules that we have to follow, the don'ts, what we should not do, what should be our postures, how do you do your breathing exercises, how do you withdraw the senses, how do you control the mind to be fixated only on self and then followed by Paramatma. So this whole process of yoga, you have to first hit self-realization and only then you can go to Paramatma realization. So it's a 2-step process in that way. Then you meditate on Lord Vishnu and then you are in complete absorption of Paramatma. So we can read some of these shlokas, it's interesting. Let's look at 610. What is Krishna telling us? A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. To practice Ashtanga Yoga, you have to give up all your material possessions. You have to go into a forest. You have to live alone. Because if you live with others, you can't control your mind. Krishna says to practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. So the reason to practice Ashtanga Yoga is to make Vishnu the goal of your life. That's your objective for practicing Ashtanga Yoga. Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of heaven or the abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. So, Krishna is saying once you've reached that elevated stage, then everything becomes regulated. Eating, sleeping, the kind of work that you do, and the way you spend your free time. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. So, how should this yogi be? As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So when you reach that stage of meditation, of dharana and dhyana, then you're not distracted by anything. Just like a lamp stays steady in a windless place, it does not move left or right, or it does not shiver or shake. That's how the mind should be. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. So, what happens to this yogi in the dharana and dhyana stage? They experience bliss. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. So, once a yogi has experienced this blissful feeling, he doesn't want to do anything else. That's it for him. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So then Krishna says, but to do this, what should the yogi do? One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. So, a yogi practicing Ashtanga Yoga must have determination, must have faith, and must not deviate from the path. Actually, this instruction applies to all of us in whichever transcendental path we are pursuing. What happens? Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction. And thus, the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. So, Krishna is saying this is for the Yoga Rudha stage. You are advanced. In that advanced stage, Krishna is saying what all you should be doing. So, what happens if the mind wanders? Krishna says, from wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under control of the self. This is when you begin to master the mind. When you can see that your mind is wandering, you tell your mind, no, come back to meditating on the self. Then Krishna says, the yogi whose mind is fixed on me, verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. So, in the stage of self realization, the yogi realizes that he is Brahman. He's got all the qualities of Brahman. Therefore, sometimes these yogis think, I am non different from God. Because they understand that the qualities that are there within them is also there in the Supreme Lord. Thus, the self controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. And Krishna comes back to the same theme that he talked about in chapter 5. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. When the yogi is meditating on Lord Vishnu, he realizes that all the jivatmas are part of Lord Vishnu. When the yogi sees a jivatma, he sees Vishnu inside every single jivatma, and every single jivatma within Vishnu. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Krishna is saying, when you reach the stage of self-realization, where you see the Lord everywhere and in everything, Krishna is saying, I'm not lost to them because they're already seeing me everywhere. And because they're seeing me everywhere, I am also present in their life. Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the Supersoul, knowing that I and the Supersoul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. I hope you picked up the distinction there. Krishna is saying, I and the Supersoul are one. And the self-realized soul has come to this conclusion. Krishna is saying the yogi knows that I am the Supersoul. That the Supersoul is not some other entity other than Krishna himself. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna. Now Krishna has finished talking about Ashtanga Yoga. Here comes Arjuna's question. O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. Krishna is saying, forget it. I can't go to the forest and do dhyana yoga. I know my mind is not ready for that. I have zero control over my mind. Of course, Arjuna is just saying that. Then what is Arjuna saying? The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So Arjuna is telling Krishna everything that you've explained. I just don't see how anyone can come to that yoga rudha stage, because the mind is always restless. It just doesn't listen to you at all. It's obstinate, it's strong, it's turbulent. So what does Krishna say to Arjuna? O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind. But it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. So let's come back to the slides. So now that you know what the 8 limbs of the yoga process is, can anyone do yoga? No. Krishna says first you have to learn to control the body. Then the mind, you should have no material desires. You should be practicing celibacy. Your concentration power should be like a lamp in a windless place, and all your habits, eating, sleeping, working, recreation should be regulated. And then Arjuna says, mission impossible. I don't think I can do what you're saying. And Krishna says, yes, I agree with you. Mind is difficult to control. But he also says how it can be done. So Krishna, in response to Arjuna's complaint, is telling Arjuna, Chanchalam hi actually, sorry, this is Arjuna speaking to Krishna. Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati balavadhridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayor iva sudushkaram. Mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, strong. Tell me to control the wind, I can do it faster. So this is the nature of our mind. One is it presents you so many options, you end up getting confused. And some of those options are in direct contradiction to each other. So it creates so many doubts within you. The other challenge is when the mind is ready to do something negative. The mind has a fantastic ability to rationalize what it's doing. It says you have the right to do it. No problem. The other person did something to you, you have every right to respond. The mind gets attached to so many things and can't let go of things, including past hurts, past grief, past insensitivities, all these things. And it does not ask for your permission when it violates scriptures. So Krishna says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Asamshayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena tu Kaunteya Vairagyena cha Grahyate. So Krishna is saying, yes, I agree with you. Mind is difficult to control. But it's possible. How so? By abhyasena, by practicing. And by detachment. Teaching and training the mind to be detached from things that are not important. So the formula to control our mind is practice and detachment. So there are certain do's and there are certain don'ts. How can you teach your mind to quell itself? By following the process of Navadvipa Bhakti. This Navadvipa Bhakti is spoken by Prahlad Maharaj to his fellow students in Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad is the pious, spiritual son of a demon called Hiranyakashipu. So Prahlad talks about the 9 processes of bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. These are the 9. Shravanam. Shravanam means hearing. Hearing what? Hearing the scriptures. Hearing the chanting of the holy names. Who is a good example who was hearing all the time, 24/7 until he left his body in the last 7 days that he had to live? This is Parikshit Maharaj when he has been cursed by Shringi, the son of Samika Rishi. He knows he has only 7 days to live, and he immediately gives up his kingdom, installs his son as the king, and walks away in search of the truth. So Parikshit Maharaj has 7 days to live. For 7 days, without eating, without sleeping, he hears Bhagavad Katha. So Shravanam, An example of that is Parikshit Maharaj. Kirtanam Vishnu. Who is glorifying the Lord for those 7 days? Shukadeva Goswami. Shukadeva Goswami is speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. So Parikshit Maharaj is exemplifying Shravanam, attentively hearing. And Shukadeva Goswami, who is speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam for those 7 days, is actually demonstrating Kirtanam Vishnu. Smaranam. Smaranam means remembering. Who's always remembering the Lord no matter what happens to him. No matter how much he's being tortured by his own father. Prahalad Maharaj exemplifies Smaranam. If his father is tossing him off the hill, he's thinking of Narayana, Narayana, Narayana. If his father has tried to poison him, he's thinking, my Narayana will save me. If an elephant has been sent to quash him, he can only think about the Supreme Lord. So Prahlad Maharaj exemplifies Smaranam. Then Pada Sevanam. Who's doing Pada Sevanam 24/7 all the time? Lakshmi Devi. She's always at the lotus feet of Lord Narayana, serving him very nicely. Pada Sevanam. Then Archanam. Archanam means worshipping the Lord. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a pastime of Maharaj Prithu, very powerful, very wealthy king who uses all his wealth to practice devotional service, pure devotion to the Lord. So King Prithu demonstrates Archanam. Then Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam. Vandanam means praying to the Lord. Who's always praying to the Lord? What's a good example from Srimad Bhagavatam? When Akrura is sent by Kamsa to go fetch Krishna and Balaram, because by now Kamsa has found out that Krishna is the one he had been waiting to be born, except he couldn't kill him at birth. He had been taken away by Vasudev to Gokul. When he receives this assignment from Kamsa, Akrura, being a devotee of the Lord, is so anxious to meet the Lord. He's constantly praying. As he's making the trip from Mathura to Vrindavan, Akrura is praying to Krishna. This is Vandanam. Then the next step, the next limb is Dasyam. The best example of someone who is always a servant of the Lord is Hanumanji. Whatever Lord Ram wants him to do, he does. No questions asked. His only joy and bliss comes from serving the Supreme Lord. And he is happy to be in that servant position. Sakhyam. Arjuna demonstrates friendship with the Lord. A higher level of intimacy. And finally, Atma Nivedanam. Again, going back to Srimad Bhagavatam, Bali Maharaj exemplifies Atma Nivedanam. Normally in our culture, when Guru instructs you, you follow the instructions of Guru without any questions being asked. And Shukracharya, who is the Guru of the demoniac people, tells him, be careful. I think this young boy, Vamanadev, who's come, is Lord Vishnu himself. He's just tricking you. Don't pour water on his hand. The minute his spiritual master tells him, I think that is Lord Vishnu, Bali Maharaj says, I will violate the instructions of my spiritual master when the Lord Himself has come and my spiritual master is telling me to be careful, then I have to reject his instruction. An example of a student disobeying Guru for a good reason. So, Bahili Maharaj does not follow the instruction of his own Guru and completely surrenders himself and everything else to Vamanadev. That is Atma Nivedanam, willing to give up himself, his kingdom, his everything. So much so the Lord says, I will become your doorkeeper wherever you are. So by practice, you can start to control the mind. And we've given 9 different ways in which you can practice various aspects of bhakti to help you begin this process of controlling the mind. For us in Kali Yuga, the 2 most important limbs are Shravanam and Kirtanam Vishnu. We should always be hearing the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and we should always be chanting the names of Lord Hari. If we do these 2 things, among other things, but these 2 are most important, then your practice will yield results when it comes to controlling your mind. Someone who is attending my classes, I don't recall who it was, had messaged me saying, please tell me, how do I let go of things that happened in the past and get rid of anxiety? Well, here's a way. And then detachment, vairagya. You know, our Vedic scriptures have so many do's and don'ts, so many rules, yam and niyam, so many are there. But there is one master rule that Krishna has given all of us in the Bhagavad Gita. One do and one don't, which is considered the mother rule from which all other rules come. If you stick to the mother rule, then all other rules you are already following. What is that? Krishna says in the middle 6 chapters when we come to it, always think of me. And Krishna says, never forget me. So one do for us is, Krishna is telling us, always think of me. That means the opposite also holds true. Never forget me. So this is the main rule for all of us. Always think of Krishna. Never forget Krishna. If we can get these 2 things right, then your mind is in control. So then Arjuna asks an important question. What happens to those yogis who could not become successful? Because Arjuna has understood, my God, this is a very long process. It's a difficult process. We have examples from the scriptures of people who were rishis who got distracted when a dancer comes, when they just hear the ankle bells of a dancer. They have not even seen the dancer, but just hearing the ankle bells distracted them from their tapas. So, a very pertinent question. What happens to those yogis who could not become successful? And Krishna says, Prapya punyakritam lokan ushitva shashvati samaha shuchinam shrimatam gehe yogo brashta bhijayate. Krishna saying the unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. So a yogi who was practicing, what happens to them? They get rewarded first of all for their long years of practice. How are they rewarded? They go to the upper planetary systems to enjoy themselves. Because what have they done? They have accumulated a lot of punya. No sukriti. Because they have accumulated so much punya, they go to the upper planetary systems so that they can enjoy a luxurious life. without any anxiety. And then they come back to planet Earth to take birth again. But Krishna is saying, no problem, but I'll give them a birth in a righteous family or a very rich family. So they can continue, they can start all over again. So imagine what a distance between the time period in which you practiced and you could not succeed. And then you have to wait for another birth to see if you can continue or start all over again. What a risky proposition. And Arjuna has understood that this is a risky proposition. This practicing Ashtanga Yoga is risky. Then Krishna will tell us a yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. So Krishna is saying such a yogi is not a small person. It's very difficult to practice Ashtanga Yoga. So he's better than an ascetic who's given up everything and living in seclusion. He's even better than an empiricist, someone who's studying jnana, who's doing study of scriptures, jnana yoga. And of course, he's better than a karma kandi, someone who's chasing material desires. So then Krishna tells Arjuna, in all circumstances, Arjuna, be a yogi. Now, of course, Arjuna said he can't be a yogi. So Krishna is saying, again coming back to the yoga ladder, that Bhakti Yoga is the topmost because it's the easiest to perform and it engages you in a very natural way. All your senses are engaged in serving Krishna. Ultimately, all the other yogis are practicing so that they can also become a bhakta one day. Krishna's point is, why not become a bhakta now? Why wait? So, the last shloka of chapter 6, Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesham matgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktatamo mataha. Krishna is saying, and of all the different types of yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, Shraddhavan bhajate yomam. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So Krishna has compared all the yogis and has emphatically stated, someone who is serving me, who's always thinking of me all the time, with great faith, he has the most intimate relationship with me. And because he has the most intimate relationship with me, he is the highest on this yogic ladder. Then Krishna says, that is my opinion. So this is why we said the last few shlokas in this chapter are very, very important for a devotee, because Krishna is clearly stating what is the position of different transcendentalists. So Krishna is advising Arjuna, become my devotee. This then sets the stage for the next 6 chapters of Bhakti Yoga, because the middle 6 chapters, although we said one way to look at it is Krishna talking about himself as Paramatma, but actually there are 3 topics covered in Bhakti Yoga. Bhagavan, Bhakta, Bhakti. How the Bhakta is performing Bhakti to get Bhagavan is the essence of the middle 6 chapters. So today's chapter summary. is easy, although Arjuna says it's very difficult. Practicing Dhyana Yoga. Is our mind our friend or enemy? Well, depends on how we've trained the mind. What are the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga? Yam, Niyam. Then asana, pranayam, pratyahara. These are the 5 stages of Yoga Rurukshu. Then the advanced stages, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. Is it practical to practice Dhyana Yoga in Kali Yuga? No. Well, what if one is practicing Dhyana Yoga but does not succeed in the same life in achieving Samadhi? What happens to them? Krishna says they take birth in the upper planetary systems where they can enjoy their lives. They have to exhaust all their pious credits. Then they will come back to the middle planetary systems and take birth either in a rich family or in a family of pious people. Then they have to begin again. Okay, fine. So which yogi is the best? Krishna says that yogi who has the most intimate relationship with me in the form of performing bhakti, that bhakta is the topmost of the yogi. So coming back to the single word summary, the single word summary for today is how you can always think of Krishna. Meditation. But then the tone and tenor of the next 6 chapters is going to change. Krishna is enjoying himself speaking about his bhakta, about bhakti, and himself in the middle 6 chapters. It's like Krishna saying, I'm talking my favorite subject, bhakti. I'm talking about my favorite people, my devotees, and why I enjoy them so much and why they enjoy me so much. So, because Krishna is the boss of all of us, tomorrow's chapter is you're going to find out who's your boss. Remember, in chapter 3, Krishna said, work for me. But before you accept a job offer, don't you want to know who's your boss? What kind of person is he? What kind of qualities does he have? So tomorrow you're going to find out who's your boss. Because now Arjuna has to make a decision. Does he want to work for Krishna or not? So the middle 6 chapters, a reverse interview happens. It's not the boss questioning you. It's the person appearing for the interview questioning the boss to find out who he is. And that's what Arjuna does in the middle 6 chapters. So join us tomorrow to begin our Bhakti Yoga session with chapter 7 called Jnana Vijnana Yoga, which is the knowledge of the Absolute. Who's the Absolute? The Supreme Lord, Krishna or Vishnu as the Paramatma is the Absolute. So let's join tomorrow, see what Krishna says about himself and how much more we can learn about Krishna in tomorrow's chapter and as a matter of fact in the next 6 chapters. Thank you very much for joining us today.